Hey everyone, I'm John Lynn, the founder and chief editor at Healthcare IT Today. We're excited to bring you another in our series of interviews with top leaders in health IT. And today's guest is Clement Goehrs. He's CEO and co-founder at Synapse Medicine. Welcome, Clement.
Hello, John. Super happy to be there.
Yeah, good to have you back on the program. You've been here before talking about some of the great work you're bringing from France to the US, and I think made a lot of progress here in the US over the years. But, tell us a little bit about yourself in Synapse Medicine for those that don't know you.
Yes, happy to do that. So I'm a physician by background in public health. And like you said, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Synapse. Synapse Medicine has been in business for 6 years now. I co-founded that with another physician and an engineer, mainly for two reasons. Number one, as a physician, I was super frustrated with the tool I had to prescribe and to make decision on complex prescription. I'll tell more about that in a minute. And number two, as a public health physician too, I saw there was a huge problem with medication safety, not only in France and in Europe, but in the US too, and actually globally. And so I just saw, okay, maybe there's an opportunity there to make a little bit of improvement on that. And that's what we do at Synapse. We're trying to bring clinical decision support and medication safety to the modern area. So that's what we do.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that. I mean, prescription safety is such an important topic. I mean, we hear all the stories of when it goes wrong, right? But where are we at now? And what are some of the challenges that we still face?
Okay, great question. So first, I think it's important to remind everyone that there's huge trends we are fighting right now. And number one, it's people getting older and older, like the demographics. And that's a huge trend. And that means more and more prescription every day and more drugs on prescription, because as people get older, they get more sick, more disease. And so just naturally we'll get more drugs on the prescription. And number two, we are actually better than 20 or 30 years ago are treating disease. So a number of things that were killing patients 20 years ago, we now have drugs to fight that. And so that means, once again, more and more drugs on the prescription. So that's huge trends, which are super difficult to fight. And so there's been a number of programs all over the world to trying to de-prescribe and to take drugs out of prescription, but those trends are just too strong. And so what we are seeing over the last 20 years is, despite of huge action from the US, from Europe, there's just a growing number of prescription and a growing number of medication and prescription. And when you have that, statistically, you will have more side effects, you will have more drug interaction, you will have more medication errors, and so you will have more problems with medication safety. So that's just the state of where we are. So having said that, there's two things you can do. You can just say, that's too bad, nothing we can do.
Hopefully we don't say that, but yeah, some do.
Or you can say, we need better tools. I mean, physicians are excellent, and pharmacists, they're trying their best, but there's like too much complexity, new drugs, new side effects, new information every single day on how to use that.
And multiple prescribers.
They just need better tools. And so that's what we're trying to do at Synapse once again. So what we do is, number one, we are building algorithms that are going to go each day and each night on all the information regarding drugs. So like FDA guidelines, scientific guidelines, publication. So those algorithms are going online and just looking at all this information. And then they are trying to structure the information and build a huge knowledge base. So that's number one, having always up-to-date information inside a huge knowledge base. So that's nice. And on top of that, we are building actual clinical decision support components. So it's like small piece of UI that you can super easily integrate inside any kind of EHR. Because once again, those topics are complex. And For small startup or very big EHR or medium one, it's super difficult to integrate new information or to modernize their tools. And so with those components that are easy to integrate and to maintain, hopefully that's bringing clinical decision support to EHR and to small startup in a more friendly way and with less resources than just direct database or APIs.
Yeah. I mean, you highlight the problem so well. I think in the last 2 weeks, I've heard of 2 friends that had multiple medications, and because of the contraindications coming from different specialties, they were having health issues. And then when they fixed the drugs, they fixed the health issues. So yeah, it's a big problem.
Yes. I mean, since I've been working at Synapse in the last 6 years, every single time I'm doing a conversation in interview, people are just bringing those topics because that's happening every single day in the US, in Europe. And that's like a silent epidemic. Like people are talking about that, there's publication, but since it's so hard to fight once again. And so in the US, we had the opioid crisis, obviously, and we had a number of problems on medication safety. Sadly, that's just a small part of what's happening with drugs. So that's a big problem and a growing one.
Yeah. And then the second piece that you said, I probably a decade ago, I had someone write on my site that the body of medical knowledge is so complex that the human mind can't comprehend it. And and he said that a decade ago, right? How much progress have we made? I think that's your point, is that there's so much information, as good as they try, they can't keep up, right?
And it's going like that. I mean, it's doubling every 60 days now, something like that. So it's just impossible. Let's say you're an oncologist. In oncology, there's new guidelines and new thing being discovered every single week, which is great for patients, which means we are making huge progress. But we just can't treat people with the same software and same tool we had 20 years ago, when we have far less information and far less drugs and far less complexity. So it's just a no-brainer that we need just better tool for physicians and pharmacists and providers.
Yeah. So let's talk about that, because I mean, I think if anyone that's listening probably says, well, haven't the EHR vendors or other digital health software, haven't they solved this problem? They all have some sort of medication management, clinical decision support. So what do you say to people like that? They're like, wait, my EHR is not doing this?
So every single EHR, I mean, all the big ones have something in place, obviously. In the US, in Europe, same thing. But if you ask the prescribers, do you actually use those clinical decision support? And are you happy with that? Do you feel that like really helping you every single day? Most of them, if not all, will tell you no, it's garbage.
Or they say it annoys them. They're telling me something I already know. They're telling me something that contradicts what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. So that's a big problem. And when we say that, I think there's like 3 problems inside this problem. Number one, like you just said, information not relevant or not up to date or not relevant to my patient. So that's number one, making sure your information is always up to date and super relevant. And that's what we do with our algorithm, like I said. Number two is just a user experience problem. If you are bringing this information to your providers with a list of 70 alerts, I mean, even if your information is great, there's no chance it's going to help the providers decide what to do, because no one has the time to read 70 alerts inside the EHR. So the number 2 problem is just like really working on your UI to make sure you're presenting the information in a way that is easy to understand, sometimes with very visual information, sometimes with visual representation of something. So like working on the way you are providing this information. And number 3 is getting more and more personalized. You don't want information that are not specific to your patients, because I mean, you're treating your specific patients, so you don't care about very general recommendation for someone else. And that's where AI and using a lot of data is really helping. And I think it's really going to help having better and better clinical decision support. Because 20 years ago, we couldn't just do that with the technology, but now we have the tools to be able to make recommendations that are very, very specific to your specific situation.
So talk to me about how Synapse has solved those three problems. I mean, like I said in our previous interview, they could go check that out and hear a lot of the background and the development, but give us kind of the Cliff Notes version. What did it take for you to solve those problems at Synapse?
So coming back to the three problems. So I said, number one, having always up-to-date information. So once again, 10 years ago, the way a lot of legacy players are doing this business is taking a lot of pharmacists and physicians and then making them read on the internet or even in books all the information, and then copying all this information inside a very big Excel sheet. And that's still what most people do, like the database and all of that. When you do that, it's easy to understand that it's difficult to maintain and difficult to have something that is really like up to date in real time because you're using a lot of human. So we solve that, but mainly doing that with algorithm and with AI. We still have obviously a lot of check to be sure that we get the good data inside our pipeline. We've done clinical study, a number of stuff. So number one, using AI to make sure you have always up-to-date information. Number two, on UI and user experience. I mean, there's no secret there. You just have to sit with your user, work a lot with them, understand what are their needs, and design your UI with them to make sure it's super easy for them to use. And so we spend tons of time with providers and pharmacists to really, really make sure that we make the best component for them and that we present, for instance, drug interaction in a way that are super easy to understand in just 1 second. And number three, personalized information. That's a mix of different technology, but mainly it's artificial intelligence and machine learning. So using a lot of data. And so we partner with hospitals, health system. We gather our own data in order to find patients that are like your patients and that's had good outcome with some kind of drugs. And so to be able to recommend something to you based both on medication safety and guidelines, plus actual real world data showing that there may be some kind of good outcome for these patients. Overall, it's a very complex job. And that's why there's a trend that we are seeing more and more where EHR are not doing that by themselves. And in Europe, we work with all the biggest EHR that 5 years ago wanted to do that all alone. And more are saying, okay, there's just too many things right now with AI, with CDS, with medication safety. We can't just do everything by yourself. And so those EHR moved from a strategy to do everything by themselves to a strategy to integrate the best-in-class product on every single vertical. And that's where we jump in and be hopefully the best-in-class for prescription.
Yeah, let's talk about that though. Like when it comes to integrating with the EHR, how can they integrate? You talked about these little components, I think is what you called it. To talk more about what it takes to integrate, how they can, what are some of the benefits, how easy is it to integrate, your product into their UI?
So it's designed and supposed to be super easy, but it really depends of the legacy of all. How much legacy you have inside your EHR and the complexity of EHR. I'll give you two very easy to understand use cases. So let's say you are a new digital health company. You want to build your own EHR. So it's brand new, it's there. And you want to work with someone for medication safety and prescription. You can work with us. And yes, it's going to be super easy. It's just one line of code for every single component. And you can choose you can choose which one you want. So let's say we want side effects and drug interaction, but you don't want allergies. I mean, You can do that.
Probably do, but okay.
Probably you don't want to do that, but if you
can
want,
choose.
you can choose, and you can choose where to put that inside your interface. And so that's really easy to just integrate, deploy, and super important, it's super easy to maintain because the component is being maintained by us. You're just maintaining the integration, period. And so we've seen integration in 10 days from like demonstration to production because super easy.
Mm-hmm.
Now we've done integration in, like I said, some of the biggest EHR of the country, like actually the EHR being used by a third of the physician in the whole country.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying that actually it was like 3 versions of the same EHR with different complexity and all of that. I mean, It took 1 year, obviously, because all different level of complexity, a lot of tests, because when you're coming into production, we can't just be done, because if we are down, if it's not working, I mean, a third of the physician in the country can't prescribe. That's not something that can happen, you know?
Yeah, you don't want to mess up.
So the complexity really differ of the EHR, but it's supposed to be super easy and developer friendly.
And what does a good user experience look like when you integrate this into the prescribing and the clinical decision support, process for a user?
So what we've learned is that no one wants to use different tools. I mean, if you're a physician, once again, or just provider, you want to have just one tool, which is your EHR.
Yeah, they're not pulling out the Palm Pilot anymore.
Yeah, you don't want to open another tab. So
yep, no more Hippocrates.
Yeah. So that's why our components are super easy to customize. And so an end user will never know that actually the prescription and the medication safety part is being done by a third player. And so the integration is like super native. So it's really super easy to understand. I'm a physician. I'm using my EHR. I want to start a prescription. I need to start a prescription. And then inside my EHR, I'm going to start prescribing with Synapse, with our autocomplete, with all the tools I just described on how to help you on prescribing. But you're still inside your EHR, and you still have the feeling of you using your EHR, and you just don't know you're using third-party component.
Wow. So can you share some examples or maybe some stories, if you know, of where good clinical decision support supports this improved prescription safety that we've talked about?
Yeah. So one example, a few months ago, in one of the hospitals where we are being used, and I mean, the physician after that told us the story, so that's why I know.
Yeah.
But that's very, very classic one. They had a patient that was getting sicker and sicker, no explanations there. They were like searching for what was wrong. And then one of the physicians was one of our early users, and he said that let's check for drug interaction and side effect, because maybe that's it. And they used our tool, and they saw that there was a drug interaction that was actually, they entered the symptoms of the patient. And Synapse told them, I think that's related to the prescription, because that's something we can see very often. And you should stop this drug, and maybe that will cure your patient. They stopped the drug, and actually that was that. And the patient recovered very well. And so that's one thing you can do with our tool. It's actually like describing with your patient and what the patient had. And we will tell you if there's chances that it's actually correlated to the prescription, to either one drugs or a mix of the drugs in the prescription. So that's number one, actually helping patients, because patients are getting sicker about the prescription. Number two, like I said, a lot of drugs on a prescription, which means a lot of potential drug-drug interaction. And if you just have the information on, okay, this is a drug-drug interaction, please don't do it, you're going to say, okay, but I mean, my patient still needs those drugs. What am I going to do? Am I like just stopping the drugs? Am I like And what we do in this case is telling you, okay, there is a drug-drug interaction. To avoid that, you could divide the dose of these drugs by 4, and that will be okay, and that will be safe. The patient will have the same treatment efficiency, but with no side effects. So actually helping you moving from just, you shouldn't do that, to, okay, you shouldn't do that, but you can do that.
But what could you do instead?
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, and I think what's interesting as you described it is something that's become a popular term with this AI movement, which, you know, everything that you've just described is what I would call co-pilot, right? It's information that's co-pilot to the doctor, who is the pilot of the care. And I think that's how most of the AI and the clinical decision support is coming. So I think that's an interesting way to look at it too. Do you see other emerging trends in clinical decision support? I think this idea of co-pilot's been around there for a while with clinical decision support. Do you see other trends kind of emerging with it?
So that's a super interesting question. And actually, we have our own Copilot version of our web, of our components. So let's talk about Copilot, because I think that's the huge trend. But I think there's the hype around that and the reality. So I was at a digital house event a few weeks ago or months ago when everyone was talking about, you know, AI and Copilot and all of that. And I met with so many funders or just people saying, okay, that's amazing. Look, I'm describing my patient into GPT-4, and then I click, what should I do? And look, GPT-4 is telling me what to do, and it's working. And I was like, okay, I mean, it's working, but sometimes it's not going to work. It's going to tell you to do something, and this thing is going to kill a patient. And to me, that's called a medical device, and you should do clinical trials. And there's no way the FDA is going to tell you that it's okay to have a system in place, which is sometimes going to recommend great things and sometimes going to kill the patient, and you just can't know when it's going to be wrong. And so that's where I'm saying the hype. It's yes, it's working, but no one can actually use that for a real patient inside a real use case. And
no one that has liability like a doctor does.
Yeah, I mean that's just not going to happen. But then there's the application of those technology to actually do cool stuff, which are safe for the patient, which are going to be able to structure a lot of information inside the EHR to use this information to make better clinical decision support. So that's number one. And number two, being able to, as a copilot, draft information and draft advice for the patient or draft care plan. But the way we do that internally is not describing the patient and asking GPT-4 to do that. Is taking the information on the patient, using your medical device to make a first assessment of what you should do, and based on that, just asking GPT-4 to make a nice narrative around that, and then double checking with our medical device that the information is still true. So what I'm trying to say is that, yes, I think there's a huge opportunity with medical copilots, but there are going to be some kind of those things that are not safe and no actual real use. And some of them coming from industry experts and people that have been in business and medical device people for years, using that for real use case. And that's just amazing, because I think for the last 20 years, we've promised those stuff to providers, but the technology was not there. And the technology is actually finally there to do those kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to your point about personalization, which to me is the biggest trend of where it needs to go. Yeah. Is the personalization. But I think to your point, the technology wasn't there to personalize it at scale, but it is now. And maybe that's the difference.
That's 100% true. So that's not hype. That's factually true. I mean, I'm not that old. when I was doing my PhD a few years ago, there was like 5 years research project to do stuff that we can do now with just one API call. So I mean, the technology was like huge research and development 5 years ago, took years, a lot of funding, all of that, and now it's just like $1,
One line of code.
API call. I mean, that's just how much the technology went better, and that's a huge shift. It's going to take a little time for providers and people to see that inside their tool, because healthcare, so it takes time, regulation, all of that, but it's there. It's going to happen.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my comment, is how quickly can we get this into the hands of doctors so they're benefiting from the, this quick evolution of technology. But I think it's happening.
I mean, we are doing that in France at scale, once again, for a third of the physicians of the country and 500,000 patients a day. We are doing that. So that's happening, that's reality. So I'm sure we'll see more and more of that in the next 2-3 years.
Absolutely. Well, Clement, I'm pretty sure people are going to want to know where they can go to learn more about Synapse Medicine. I'm sure check out, proofs in seeing the demo, seeing it in action, and checking
Just
it
go
out
on the website, you'll get all the information.
Awesome. So you can check it out at synapsemedicine.com. So thanks so much, Clement. I appreciate you taking time for sharing these. I mean, this is really great because prescription safety and patient safety is such an important topic. So appreciate you doing that. And thanks everyone for watching and listening. If you want to find more great healthcare IT content like this, be sure to check it out at healthcareittoday.com or search for Healthcare IT Today on your favorite podcast application. Thanks, Clement.
Thanks. Bye-bye.